12 countries, 47 front pages, one man.
And a question the whole world is now asking, quietly, behind closed doors, in languages Trump doesn't speak. Did we make a mistake? Donald Trump returned to the White House in January 2025 with the most powerful military on Earth, the largest economy on Earth, and something even rarer, a second chance. So the question is not whether Trump won. The question, the one that will define this decade, is, did the world? Because right now, in government buildings from Ottawa to Berlin, from Tokyo to Nairobi, world leaders are asking something they never thought they'd ask about America. Can we still trust them? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand something about global power that most people, even political analysts, haven't fully grasped yet. Let's start where science always starts, the data. The Pew Research Center, one of the most credible polling institutions on the planet, conducted a sweeping global attitude survey in spring 2025. 24 countries, every continent, tens of thousands of respondents, and the verdict? 67% described Trump as a strong leader. You might think, that sounds good. Strength, power, leadership. But read the next number. Only 28% called him honest. 65% of the entire global survey, nearly two-thirds of the world, called him dangerous. And 80%, 4 out of every 5 people surveyed, described him as arrogant. Think about what that tells you. The world sees a powerful man, but not a trustworthy one. And in geopolitics, in the real architecture of global power, power without trust is not leadership, it's threat. Trump's confidence rating among Europeans, just 2.6 out of 10. The only world leader ranked lower was Vladimir Putin, who scored 1.5. Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Let that land. The President of the United States, historically the anchor of the free world, now sits in the same trust category as the man who invaded Ukraine. Not our words, Pew Research, hard data. In Europe specifically, 3 in 4 people, 73%, viewed Trump not as a rival, not as a disagreement, but as a direct threat to peace and security on their own continent. Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Not someone else's problem, their problem. But here's where it stops being just about opinion polls. Here's where it starts costing real people real money. Because in 2025, this became economic warfare, waged by the United States against its own closest allies. Just 2 weeks into his second term, Trump signed orders imposing 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and 10% on China. Together, these 3 countries account for 40% of everything the United States imports. 40%. That is not a trade policy adjustment. That is a grenade thrown into the foundation of North American commerce, and the shockwave? Immediate. Canada's economy shrank by 1.6% in a single quarter, the second quarter of 2025, largely because of falling exports. Unemployment crossed 7% by August. By June, U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada had doubled to 50%. Then came Europe, on what economists quickly labeled Liberation Day, April 2, 2025. Trump announced a 10% global tariff and a 20% reciprocal tariff on EU imports. The S&P 500 dropped nearly 5% in a single session, its worst fall since 2020. The EU offered a deal, a zero-for-zero arrangement on industrial goods, a genuine olive branch. Trump doubled down. A survey of 6 major EU nations, France, Germany, Spain, Belgium, Poland, Italy, found that only 12% still saw the United States as a close ally. 36% now classified it as a direct threat. 12%. A generation ago, those same nations built their entire foreign policy around American partnership. They sent their sons to die alongside American soldiers. They rebuilt their economies on American trade. And now, 12%. But wait, because this is not the most alarming number in this story. Not even close. While America was burning its bridges, China was building new ones, quietly, methodically, without a single tweet. In early 2026, a Gallup report confirmed what analysts had suspected. China had surpassed the United States in global approval ratings, the widest margin Gallup had recorded in China's favor in nearly 20 years. Meanwhile, global disapproval of U.S. leadership had risen to a record high 48%. Read that one more time. For the first time in a generation, more people around the world view China more favorably than America.
This is the hidden cost.
The one nobody in Washington wants to say out loud.
Not the tariffs, not the broken alliances, not the insulted allies.
It's the vacuum, the geopolitical vacuum that forms when the world's anchor power starts behaving like a rogue one. And China stepped right into it. Analysts are now increasingly concluding that this is not a temporary shock, not a diplomatic blip, but a longer, structural recalibration of the global order in which China gains relative influence and countries begin treating the U.S. as simply one great power among many. Factually, one great power among many. That phrase, that six-word phrase, should send a chill through every person who has ever believed in American leadership. Because for 80 years, since Bretton Woods, since the Marshall Plan, since the moon landing, American exceptionalism was built on being the indispensable nation. Not one of many, the one. And that era, it may be ending, not with a war, with a tariff. Now, let's bring this home, literally, because the most dangerous number in this entire story isn't in Europe, it's not in Asia, it's not even in a polling center. It's in the living rooms of the people who put him there. As of late 2025, 14% of Trump voters themselves said they regret their vote. Among non-MAGA Republicans, that number rises to 17%. And when asked why, what drove that regret, the answer wasn't border policy, it wasn't woke culture, it wasn't foreign affairs. It was the economy and broken promises. 61% of Americans disapproved of Trump's handling of inflation and the cost of living. The forgotten Americans. The factory workers, the farmers, the people he stood in front of at rally after rally and said, "I am your voice." Half of all Americans said it was extremely concerning that the president who promised to look out for forgotten Americans was now cutting food assistance and health care while passing tax cuts for the wealthy. The forgotten Americans, forgotten again. And the approval rating? Trump sat 13 points underwater in overall approval and a staggering 38 points underwater among independent voters. When you lose independence by nearly 40 points, you haven't built a movement. You've built a moment, and moments, they pass. Here's something that isn't politics, it's behavioral science. Trust, real institutional trust, the kind built between nations, follows a specific psychological pattern. Researchers call it the asymmetry of trust. It takes years, sometimes generations to build, and seconds to destroy. America's reputation as a reliable ally and a supporter of democracy has been seriously damaged across Trump's 2 terms. Traditional partners, Australia, Canada, Germany, France, now hold deeply unfavorable views of the United States. Favorability of the U.S. dropped 20 percentage points in Denmark and 12 in Sweden, 2 of the most historically loyal American partners in all of Europe. These aren't adversaries turning cold. These are friends who feel abandoned, lectured, tariffed, threatened. Think about what it took to build those relationships. The Marshall Plan, the Atlantic Charter, decades of shared intelligence, shared sacrifice, shared vision. What happens when a single administration treats all of that as a negotiating chip? The world doesn't just protest. The world adjusts. It finds new centers of gravity, new partners, new systems that don't depend on Washington's mood. And that adjustment, silent, structural, irreversible, may be the most consequential geopolitical shift of our lifetime. So, is the world regretting Donald Trump? The data says yes, the polls say yes, the allies say yes, even a portion of the people who voted for him say yes. But here's the question that none of those polls can answer. Can it be undone? Is America's position in the world something that can be rebuilt through diplomacy, through new leadership, through the slow, patient work of regaining trust? Or has something shifted in the deeper architecture of global power, something that no election, no treaty, no speech can reverse? Because when China leads in global approval for the first time in 20 years, when America's closest neighbors see it as a threat rather than a partner, when 2 out of every 5 independent American voters have turned their backs, something has changed. Not just in policy, not just in polls, in the physics of global power. And physics, unlike politics, doesn't care about what you promised. Science, power, truth. If this video shifted something in how you see the world, that's why this channel exists. And if you think the answer to today's question is something the mainstream won't tell you, subscribe, because the next one goes even deeper.